Progress. Okay. Erev Tov, everyone. So there is a very cryptic statement of Chazal now in Sefer Breshit, Pashat Lech Lecha, getting to the stories of the Avot, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. So Chazal tell us in the Gemara and Yoma in a number of places that the Avot kept the entire Torah before it was given. It's a very, very cryptic statement. Right? Certainly, if we take it literally, so it will raise a lot of questions and a lot of problems. For example, if we take it literally, so when Avraham put on tefillin, did he have tefillin of Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam? Did we'll get to that. But I'm saying that when Yitzchak, fulfilled the mitzvah to remember what Amalek did to us, how exactly did he remember something that hasn't yet taken place? Obviously, I mean, you can think of a number of examples. It gets a little bit farcical if you understand it literally. Right now, there are commentators. There are those who understood literally, which was mentioned here. One of the big problems, which the Rishonim already raised, is that Yaakov Avinu married two sisters. That's explicitly against the Torah. So how could it be that? What exactly do Chazal mean? I mean, Chazal take this as far. In the Gemara, it actually says that they kept everything. Avraham Avinu even kept eruv tavshilim. Right. So if you understand it on a literal level, as I say, it raises a number of issues and a number of problems. Most of the Mefarshim understand. It's not meant to be taken literally, but there's something deeper. There's something conceptually behind the statement. It's trying to teach us a message. We're trying to uncover exactly what that message is, or at least one direction of it. That's one question. That's one question that comes up. Another question, which a couple of weeks ago, when we began reading the Torah again, so we mentioned the first Rashi. The first Rashi on Parshat Breshit, where Rashi tells us, right, why did the Torah have to begin with Breshit Bara? Surely the Torah should have begun with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, Parshat Bo, the first mitzvah, which was given to the Jewish people. And Rashi says the reason it begins in Bereshit is Koach Ma'asav Yigid Le'amo Latet Le'em Nachalat Goyim. We've spoken about that a number of times. I'm not going to talk about that principle now. But the point is that if the Torah had to begin with Bereshit to tell us about God's creation of heaven and earth and God's ownership of the entire world, right? So that explains maybe the story of creation, Parshat Bereshit, maybe Parshat Noach at a stretch. But what about Lech Lecha now, all the way to the end of Breshit, all the way to Parshat Bo? There's plenty that still happens. We've learned Koach Ma'asav Yigid Le'amo. Now the Torah is telling us stories. Torah is not a storybook. Torah is a book of Torah from Lashon Hora'ah. It's meant to tell us what to do, tell us the mitzvot, tell us how to behave, tell us what we have to do, right? So why is it that we would know about all the stuff, many of the stories that we grow up with, everybody knows about Abraham smashing his father's idols, right? Everybody knows about Abraham being thrown into the furnace, right? That's not written in the Torah explicitly. We have that in Midrashim. So we know the stories. The question is, why is it part of the Chumash? Why is it so central that it has to be here? Okay, so those are two questions, which may or may not be related one to another. And I want to share with you an insight of Rabbi Kenigsberg. He brings in his Emet Yaakov, which really ties it all together and brings out a beautiful lesson and helps us answer some of these questions on the way. So, Rabbi Kenigsberg, and I'll read it to you inside the Emet Yaakov, this week's parsha. So we have the pasuk that tells us, we know we have the Milchama, we have the First World War, perhaps, between the 4 kings and the 5 kings, right? And we know that Abraham, right, the Torah tells us at this point, he's still called Abraham, Vayishma Abraham ki nishba achiv vayarek et chanicha. This is where Abraham goes to war. He goes to participate. It's quite... I remember last year, as we were reading these parashiot the first time throughout the war, all of a sudden you read through Sefer Breshit, and it's the entire Chumash, in truth, and it resonates perhaps in a way that it didn't resonate before, and perhaps we realize that Maaseh Avot Siman Nebanim, the things that happened in the Chumash are just as timely and just as relevant now. We're talking about wars and captives and all sorts of things. But essentially what happens is that Lot gets, Avram's nephew, gets taken captive. Interestingly, Barbanel points out that in the pasuk before, Lot is referred to as Ben Achiv. In the pasuk that tells us that he was taken captive, what does it say? It says Vayishma Avram ki nishba. It doesn't say Ben Achiv, it says Achiv. It's his brother. And that is a message, and that is the moment that he was taken captive, the moment he was taken hostage, the moment that somebody is a fellow Jew is in trouble and is in distress. So we see them as Achiv. We see them as his brother. There's no distance between them. In any event, so Avram goes out to war. And he goes out, literally, he goes out to fight. He endangers himself, endangers his own life, endangers the lives of his soldiers, how many were there with him, in order to go and rescue Lot. Now, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says as follows. He says, "Hinei, ilo haya Abraham shoel sheila, yichayav lelech latzil et Lot." Let's say before this, Abraham kept the Torah before it was given, right? Abraham comes and asks a shayla. He says, "Kvod Arav." I don't know who Abraham's going to ask his shaylas to, but anyway, he says, and if we was to ask the question, does he have to go? Should he go and endanger himself in order to rescue Lot? So what would we say? We'd probably say no. He says, okay, we won't get into this whole sugya. Does a person have to put themselves into danger? We're not getting into the sugya now of a national war, etc. But let's think about it for a moment. Why is Lot in the situation in the first place? Right? Let's go back. Lot, remember that the 4 kings against the 5, one of those kings is the king of Storm. Right? Lot has gone. Lot was with Abraham. With the beginning of the parasha, we read, Lech Lecha, Abraham leaves, he takes Lot with him, he goes with him. At a certain point, they start to have a conflict, they start to have a machloket. And Lot decides, okay, I'm going to separate. I have the option of being with Abraham and being in the house of Abraham. I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to go and live where? In Storm, of all places. The most decadent, the most immoral, the most corrupt society on earth. Why? It's good, it's got a good economy. Essentially, that's what Lot does, right? Now, that's the individual. That's who we're dealing with. You were brought up by Abraham. You were raised by Abraham. You were in his home. You owe him everything. You'd be nothing. Right? Chazal even tell us the reason that Lot was saved ultimately afterwards because of the merit of Abraham, not because of himself. And you decide you're going to go away. You're going to go and live in Storm, no less. So from Abraham's perspective, right now, okay, this ungrateful nephew, who's gone, he's taken himself off, he's left, he's completely discarded his way of life. He's gone, he's living in the most immoral society on earth, literally, there's no exaggeration. And now finds himself in trouble. So Abraham has to stop, has to pack up everything, has to go, has to endanger his own life, to go and save his ungrateful nephew. So we can understand, right, when you think about it like that, a lesser person, and many people in a similar situation would have said, okay, he got what he deserves. He got what he deserves. He got into this mess. Let him fix it. Let him deal with it. Clearly, it's not what Abraham does. Right? So he says, and part of the reason why, this is Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, he says, Elama she'asa ken Abraham, hu mishum she'avot nikra'u yesharim. Spoken about this before as well, the introduction of the Netziv to Sefer Bereshit, right? But it's based on the Psukim. The Avot were called Yesharim. The Avot were Yashar. Yeah, how do you translate the word Yashar? Upright, honest, straight. Sounds much better in Hebrew, but it's Yashar. Hainu, shekol hanagatam hayta lo al pi dinei Torah, elo al pi hasechel hayashar. This was before the Torah was given, but they were acted according to common sense. He says according to basic decency. And what's the decency here? Ki Elokim asat adam yashar, ve'al pi hayosher haya mutar al Avraham nishtadel latzil et Lot. It's that why, according to basic decency, basic yashrut, Abraham needed to go and save Lot. He says, Ki Avraham ergish tatzmo ke'achrai lishlomo shel Lot. Even though it wasn't his fault directly, but indirectly, whatever it is, Avraham felt on a certain level he was responsible. Rabbi Ein mentioned this the other day. We saw the whole story of the furnace. Remember, what happened to Lot? What happened to Lot's father? Why was he raised in the home of Avraham? So the Midrash tells us, Rashi quotes it in last week's Parsha, right, that when Avraham was thrown into the furnace by Nimrod, so he survived. So at the time, Nimrod comes to Avraham. He says, I hear you don't follow my idols. You believe in this monotheism. Okay, I'm going to throw you into the fire. Now Haran, Avram's brother, is sitting there and he's watching this whole thing take place as well. And he knows that he's next. So what's he going to say? Nimrod's going to come to him. He's going to say, are you with me or are you with Avraham? So what does he say to himself? He says, okay, good job, I'm second. He says, I'll watch, I'll see what happens first. I'll see what happens to Avraham. If Avraham survives and he comes out of the fire, so I'll say I'm with Avraham. And if Avraham dies, then I'll say I'm with Nimrod. Right? It hedges his bets, but like all the pollsters at the moment, right? Hedging their bets. Whatever happens, nobody can say I got it wrong. So, except what happens? So Avraham comes out, and they turn to Haran and they say, okay, are you with Avraham or are you with Nimrod? He says, oh, with Avraham. Throw him into the fire. Miracle doesn't happen again. Because he wasn't really, he was hedging his bets, so therefore that's what happens to him. Anyway, but as a result, so Avraham felt a certain sense of responsibility. Obviously, it wasn't his fault, but because of what happened to Avraham, so Haran is gone. So now he's responsible for Lot. He's the one who's going to be raising him, and he has that responsibility. And therefore, אברהם הרגיש את עצמו כאחראי לשלומו של לוט, מכיוון שהרן אביו מת בכבשן אביו משום שאמר שהוא מאמין באלוקי אברהם. Ultimately, his father died because he said he believes in the God of Abraham. ולכן על פי היושר, and he writes, menschlichkeit, right? That's the menschlichkeit, that's the right thing to do. הוכרח אברהם להעריך את חניכיו ולרדוף אחר המלכים. He had to go, and he had to go into the war, and he had to save. And he says, באמת כל חיי האבות שחיו קודם זמן מתן תורה, היו מונהגים על פי היושר. Right? The Avot lived before the Torah was given. When it says, and he says, maybe this is the point, when Chazal say, and they kept the Torah before it was given, they're referring to that yashrut, that yosher, that sense of justice, that sense of righteousness, that sense of menschlichkeit, which is the foundation, which is the basis of the Torah. That was what the Avot kept, and that was how they lived their lives. And then he says, very interesting, at the end of Parashat Mishpatim, the pasuk says as follows. It says, "Ve'tna lecha et luchot ha'even, HaTorah v'Mitzvah." Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I've given you the Luchot HaEven, the tablets of the Torah and the Mitzvah. So I understand what the Mitzvah is. The Mitzvah, the 613 Mitzvah, that's what's in the Torah. What does it mean, HaTorah v'Mitzvah? The implication is that there's something different. So the Gemara gives one answer. But Rav Yaakov says something else. He says, Bishlam ha-mitzvot, mitzvah inu mitzvot shenitztava bain. I understand the mitzvah, it means the mitzvot that we've been commanded. What does it mean when it says the Torah? Right, it says, Niresh ha-kavana u'lesipurei Torah. It means the stories in the Torah. Which stories? Shel Avot. Sipurei Torah shel Avot, shenichtavu b'Torah kodem ha-mitzvot. All these stories were written in the Chumash. They needed to be written in the Chumash as part of the Torah. He says, Torah milashon hora'ah. The word Torah comes from the language of instruction, as we've already said. Klomar molei derech, showing you the path, showing you the way. Ki sipurim elu molim la'adam ech lechyot afilu bli tzivui Hashem yibarach. Even without a commandment. K'mo shema David b'kinato Shaul alo iktuv al Sefer Yashar. Right, Sefer Bereshit, as we said, is called Sefer Yashar. And he says, now he says explicitly, maybe that's what Rashi means, what he's referring to at the beginning of the Torah. He says in a Rashi, Resh Bereshit, Iksha, מדוע התחילה התורה מבראשית ברא אלוקים, היה לו להתחיל מהחודש הזה לכם. As we said, right, the Torah did not need to begin from Bereshit bara, could have started with the first mitzvah. תירץ משום כוח מעשה והגיד לעמו לתת להם נחלת גויים, as we've said. ולכאורה, זה רק מיישב מדוע הביאה התורה את סיפורי מעשה בראשית. That only explains to us why the Torah brought the story of creation. אבל כל הפרשיות, מלך לך עד פרשת פה עדיין אינו מובן. All these parashot from now, Lech Lecha, until Parashat Bo, why do we need them? That Rashi didn't answer. He didn't say anything. According to what we've just explained, there's no difficulty at all. He says all of these stories, and we have to look through and we have to read them carefully and we have to understand Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and all the things that they did. It's teaching us how to act with that menschlichkeit. It's teaching us how to act al pi hayosher. That is the derech eretz shekadma Torah. So in the Torah itself, the Torah begins with derech eretz, and then we have the Torah, then we have the mitzvot. Same way, that's the foundation. The same way that Abraham felt sense of responsibility for Lot, even if maybe he didn't go in that way and he didn't act in that path, but nonetheless, that's what he did. That's what he felt was yashar. That's what he felt was required from him, even without a command. And therefore he says, that's how we learn what we should do as well. And even when he says, this is something which all humanity should understand, even with those who aren't commanded in the mitzvot specifically. Everybody can do this, and everybody should do this, and everybody is obligated to live in such a way. So maybe that's another dimension. And maybe that's what Chazal were trying to tell us. There's a certain natural morality, there's a certain natural menschlichkeit that a person has to have. That's what the Avot had. That's what they demonstrated even before the Torah was given. So all the more so, now that we have the Torah and the mitzvah and the derech eretz, together with the Torah that comes after. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash, Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zakot Yisrael, וכך בא להם תורה מצוות, 12 חפץ למען, צדקו יגדיל תורה וידעו.